Welcome to Deep, the health marketing podcast. I'm John Mangano. Deep is the show where we explore how marketing improves patient health with the people who are doing it. I hear a lot about how pharma marketing is different from other industries, and sometimes even that we're behind. So today, I'm talking to someone who has spent much of her career outside of pharma. She's led successful campaigns in fast moving industries, including CPG, retail, and financial services. And she's bringing that experience to healthcare. I want to hear what's different, what's surprisingly similar, and where she thinks healthcare marketing needs to go next. I'm here today with Erin Nocito, Executive Director and Head of Global Media at Amgen. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you. What makes our business so great is that we're able to make an impact on everyone's entire part of their day, right? So from their work day to maybe what they have to do to what they like to do. And helping people's healthcare helps them enjoy that part of their life and every part of their life better. What do you like to do outside of work? What gets you excited?
Well, I am a proud mom of a 6-year-old boy, so he is the epitome of what gets me excited these days. We are just getting into the stage of his life where he's got friends and sports and all the little activities to keep him busy, and I'm just trying to be there for as many of those and enjoy them with him and get to know all these new people that are coming into his life, which is just it's quite special to get to see life again through a little person's eyes and a little person's experiences. Outside of that, I grew up playing tennis. I played tennis into college, so I don't play nearly as much as I used to, but watching and actually starting to see my son play a little bit is a lot of fun. So I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. And sleep. Sleep is the next best thing I would say. After kid, some sports, and then some sleep feels really good. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that. My daughter's now grown up, but the best point in when as she was growing up, every stage was fantastic. But I love skiing, and when she started to ski with me, it was the first time I realized that this is a thing I like to do. She can do with me. It's no longer doing the things she likes to do, which were fantastic, but like we could enjoy the same thing together. So I'm
Yes.
sure playing tennis
Yes.
with your son must be amazing.
Yes. And it also helps you realize how much older you've gotten over time. So yeah, but it's all in all just a great thing for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're in pharma. And, I find it funny because I think people might even see me as a lifer in the industry. And I myself had an interesting change from my original industry, which, was telco and travel, and found myself through an interesting story in pharma. And I think everybody has an interesting story of how they found themselves in pharma. How did you find yourself working in the pharma industry?
Yeah, it wasn't by a plan, that's for sure. I would say even my career in media and advertising wasn't necessarily the plan either. I started off going to school, and like many undergrads, thought I knew what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to go to law school, and thankfully had the opportunity to do an internship at a law firm. And no offense to anyone that chose that path, it's a fantastic path, but it just wasn't the one for me. So I got to figure that out early on. Had a few other internships along the way, which thankful again for those, and ended up working at an agency on Gillette blades and razors advertising before P&G acquired Gillette. And that was my entryway into media and advertising. And from there, I spent many years agency side working on predominantly packaged goods. Spent a great deal of time working on the P&G business, which was a fantastic experience. I mean, it's a great way to learn marketing in a real world setting, right? They are the experts in so many respects when it comes to marketing and advertising, and so I had a great experience there. Spent a few more years agency side, and actually ended up connecting with Eli Lilly at a time where they were starting to build out their central media team through a lens of let's bring experts in that have worked outside of pharmaceutical advertising, media, marketing. and was able to take advantage of that, and then got my crash course in healthcare and pharmaceutical advertising. But in a way that allowed me to really bring that external expertise to the table too. It was encouraged. And that was empowering, and I think was a fantastic mixture of a learning curve and also being able to bring all of yourself and all that you've gathered over 15, 18 years to the table in a new career setting too. So that was my entryway into pharma.
So, with all these very interesting, and when you're in pharma, you're like, they can do advertising in a way we can, and so many interesting things that we don't do. Although, quite honestly, we do things. The product we deliver is so much greater, so exciting. But so you've worked in a lot of different industries. What campaigns and what experiences do you find are just so related to what you do that you never would have expected, but that you leverage from your past life?
It's interesting because I think one of the things that I have really learned to value working in pharma is the fact that even on the most boring of days, which there aren't too many, you can walk away feeling like, okay, I had even a very small percentage of an impact on someone's life, quality, quantity, right? It is a very special space to be pharmaceutical healthcare, very special space to be working in. But when I look at my time before that, even for example, I worked on the Walmart account retail for a while, for a few years. And I had the unique experience of being able to work on their campaigns with their store openings. So this was during the time of the recession. Walmart was in a unique business opportunity, business state, and there were a lot of grand openings happening. And each store would get their own advertising plan, their own media plan. And that could range from 3 to 30 stores a month. Um, and you literally would get on the phone with your corporate team, but also the local store manager and whoever else he or she wanted to bring to the table and go through the details of their media and advertising plan. And you realized how personal this business, this large, obviously very large business at a corporate level was to the people that were running it on a local basis, right? They cared about what billboard on what highway on what road was getting chosen for that plan, right? They cared about what their customers would see at every turn coming towards their store. And it really made you appreciate what sometimes could feel like a very overwhelming part of their business, made you appreciate the human aspect of that work too. And then I'll add to that, when I was working on the P&G business, I worked on Dawn dish soap. And it's many times dish soap doesn't feel like the most exciting piece of work to wake up and try to push forward every day. But was able to work on the campaign that was regarding wildlife and how Dawn dish soap was being used to clean oil
Oh,
off
I love
of,
those ads.
yeah, off of their feathers and their skin. And again, we had the opportunity to go to some of the wildlife centers and see how the product was being used, and it really brought human animal, just a life touch to work that it doesn't always feel like it's work that's driving a tremendous impact. But in those moments, you realize, yeah, it's about more than sales, which is really, really special.
And I think both those stories align with and I've worked probably with every brand in the industry at this point. Um, but we all have that in common, which is it is very personal. And, when you look at, I've worked with clients where, they recognize that they're not just reaching patients, but actually very emotionally, uh, you know, reactive patients because of the condition they have. And so they have to be very careful, because they want to make sure that they aren't, they're giving them confidence to feel better, to get the treatment, but also understanding there are times when the confidence isn't there because it's a tough condition. And I think your Walmart story in many ways is very similar because it's understanding that customer at that very moment, um, is going to make the impact that's so important.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think when you pull that through to healthcare or pharmaceutical advertising, that's why connecting the doctor and the patient journey, communication, story is so critical because I think we can play a role in um, helping patients giving patients the tools that they need or want to communicate with their doctor and vice versa, right? Helping doctors understand what that experience is like for their patients too. And there's a lot of importance in that for sure.
So, when you moved over to pharma, what was your first reaction to the way marketing is approached in this industry? Because it is unique.
My first reaction to that question is there, oh wow, there's a lot of rules. Right? Which I think a lot of folks would say in their first year working within the industry. Uh, but I think in some ways too, even with all those rules, it was very liberating because um, you were able to start to realize and find power in and freedom in the fact that you were having an impact on lives in a way that you maybe necessarily weren't having before, right? And I think that really came to had for me during COVID. I was working on a part of the Lilly portfolio that was for diabetes treatments, and these were patients that really, um, needed to stay safe, needed their medication in order, and couldn't risk that not being available, not knowing where to find it during that time. And it was there was a freedom in knowing that you were doing that type of work because it allowed you to see beyond the day to day, the minute to minute meetings, right? But on the ground, yeah, there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of parties that we have to bring along with us to make decisions. And so it just requires the ability to think a few steps ahead, be collaborative, right? Because it's not just marketing, it's not just media. You have to bring legal and medical and regulatory along for many of the decisions that we're trying to make. Um, but with all of that said, it can be it can bring a lot of freedom to the work that you're doing because there's just a bigger purpose in mind when you're doing it.
I used to work with Edwards Life Sciences, and they build heart valves, and it was really powerful. I never got to attend one of these events, but I heard about it, where they bring in once a year the patients for whom had their valve, and the people who actually, because the valves are made by hand, the people who actually had it or who created it got to meet the person for whom was had that valve in them. So that kind of direct interaction to know that, wow, I made this difference. And it couldn't be more obvious than that. But I think we see it in our numbers, we see it in the data that we have, that um, you know at scale we're helping people, which is really amazing.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
So when you look at pharma and specifically pharma marketing and what we do, where do you think we're ahead of other industries?
Hmm. Um, I definitely, and this has become more and more, I think, apparent in the last few years. We have had to operate in a world where sensitivity to data gathering, usage, sharing, right? A world where that always has required a great deal of attention for good reason, a great deal of responsibility, and being conservative with it, again, for good reason. And I think that that has positioned us well, and in some cases, maybe ahead of the curve as the world of data accessibility, ingestion, use has changed for the entirety of advertising, marketing, media as a whole. So I do think we have found ourselves ahead of the curve in that respect, knowing that that is a responsibility that we have to take on and one that we already have some tools to handle with. Um, I also think that maybe compared to other industries too, we've had to think about both ends of the spectrum. Our marketers, our media and advertising people, our agency partners have had to think about what are we saying to customers in pharma space, that's HCPs, and what are we saying to patients or consumers, right? And I think that connectivity between whether it's the sales team, right, for packaged goods and a consumer or a shopper, that's not always as deeply ingrained into the work that you're doing as it is for pharma. So I think getting used to and being able to talk about that full spectrum of the audiences that you're trying to reach and what you're saying to them and how do you connect that story is something that that our industry has had to grow up being a little bit better at, a little bit more aware of, right? I think there's a ton of opportunity there still, but I do think that we drive that connectivity with some more muscle memory versus other industries.
It's interesting that you say that because we're probably the last industry to get into marketing, just the nature of who we are. And I think it was like in the 90s when we started marketing. Um, but in many ways, with the level of data we have, and it's protected in such a great way because we've had to, we're further ahead than industries that P&G as an example. I had lots of friends who went there and they were like, well, we invented marketing, and there's some truth to that, but I don't know if they're as far ahead as it pertains to using the data and protecting data as us who've just joined the marketing industry.
I do think we've had to learn as a healthcare pharmaceutical industry what to do maybe in a more sophisticated way with marketing and media data. I think we played a bit of catch up there, but the infrastructure and the attention that's required to how information and data is used and where it's housed, and I think that's where we've had to level up on other industries. I do think we've had to play a bit of catch up on the marketing side. And I'll say, specifically for Amgen, we've benefited from great science, great innovation, the connectivity face to face with our professional and doctor community. And obviously, the world continues to evolve. And I think we've had to kind of accelerate how we think about reaching patients and in a more competitive environment, more competitive therapeutic areas where there's more voices speaking to our patients and our customers simultaneously. And the data that comes out of that and goes into that sort of marketing ecosystem is newer likely for us and for many of other companies in this space, right? I think that's where you've seen some of that separation between healthcare and other industries, but we're catching up. It takes some time, right? We've been a different beast for a while.
And if there's anything holding us back, what would it be?
It's a great question. I don't know if I would classify it as holding us back, but I think that there's a lot of opportunity that remains when it comes to giving more information, more valuable information, more tools to patients. Um, there is a growing demand, and there has been for a while, for patients to own more of their healthcare decisioning, to have the tools to walk into their doctor's office to drive the conversation. We know that they have less time when they go into doctor's offices. So being able to fuel where they want to focus that time, I think is something that patients really want more and more of, that empowerment. And so I think the more that we can do to embrace that and give them the disease related information, the product related information with as much, granularity and specificity as they want. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there for not just the business, but obviously for the patients too, and the caregivers as well. I think that's another part of our broader patient audience, right? That, and I can say that from firsthand experience, having to be a caregiver for my father, that it's hard to find information, and that the patient at hand isn't always necessarily the one that's able to do that legwork. So it's patient, but it's also that community around them that really will benefit from a broader library of information, disease related and product related, to empower them when it comes to their doctor conversations.
Which is amazing because there's more information than ever. And I think I saw a stat that about 30% of all information is health related information. So is it an access challenge, or is it availability, or what is it that we can change to help make that information better?
It's a great question. I think it's a matter of having it be digestible and available when it's needed. Because in so many of these cases, whether it's a patient or a caregiver, they may not be looking for this information until they're in the moment of decisioning, right? Or having to prepare for a decision or having to prepare for a big doctor visit. And so ensuring that it is accessible and available, and we start to build that relationship where it makes sense even before that moment, I think is critical, right? We can't rely on the patient or ask the patient or the caregiver to really start to dig into a library of information at that moment in time. But if we're building that relationship and that awareness, and then offering it up in a way that is digestible at those critical moments, I think that's the piece that really becomes powerful, right? But you're right. There's a ton of information out there. I think it's about the when, where, and how that it really becomes that really helps it make that information useful for them.
Yeah, I think that lines up. We did some research earlier this year, where it identified the the impact that advertising has. And 15 years ago, there was a lot of outcry that pharma advertising, you know, wasn't necessarily in the best interest of patients, especially by HCPs. But what the research found was HCPs are appreciating it now. And I think what really has changed is we've gotten better at the advertising as an industry, and ultimately it's helping people understand the conditions. So, I've never had RA, but even if I wasn't in the pharma industry, I would have a pretty good sense of what RA is. And quite honestly, it's not that uncommon. So that if I were diagnosed with it, I think I would be over that initial, there's probably shock, denial, and just fear of something I don't know. But I think with all the conditions, as we all simply get more educated on them because it's in media, I think as a population, we're able to react and absorb more information when the time comes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So when we look at creativity in our messaging, whether it's traditional advertising or even alternative advertising, what what differs in pharma, and for better or for worse?
That's a tricky one because I think the perception, and maybe rightly so, is that our like the industry wide version of creativity hasn't always been the best, right, compared to other industries. And part of that, I mean, I don't personally right now work on the creative side, but just from what I know around what needs to be included in our ads, I think part of that is just there's a lot we have to squeeze into small windows of space or time, right? Just by law. So I do want to give that caveat and that credit to the industry, right? I think it's not as easy necessarily at all times, and I also think what we're talking about is not always, it doesn't always lend itself automatically to being lighthearted and creative in nature, right? It's some of life's bigger moments. I do love the way that many pharmaceutical advertisers are starting to lean into moments in time, events that are lighter in nature, that feel less heavy than maybe the disease itself, uh, to to lend a little bit of lightness, but also relevancy, right? So you look at how many advertisers are starting to become a part of sporting events, which is tremendously relevant to many of our audiences. Big entertainment industry moments in time like Grammys and Oscars, etc. I think there's something to being able to still bring your brand and your product portfolio to that moment, right? We don't want to hide or not speak about what our brands represent, but being able to align that with maybe slightly lighter moments from a cultural standpoint, I think can strike a nice balance, right? That is hard to find maybe just independently in a 60 or a 90-second TV ad, all about your product itself, right? So I really do like what many of the companies in our space are starting to do there. I think it's a great way to tap into lighter moments and be really relevant at the same time.
Yeah, and it's such a hard thing when you're talking about health conditions. You know, the ads that get all the attention after the Super Bowl are usually very funny, and they're memorable for a reason. And health you can't make light of the way you might be able to make a beer ad. Which makes it that much trickier. Which is why I always think I'm always impressed by pharma, because while we have maybe a hand tied behind our back sometimes in marketing, we find a way to be relevant, to be successful, um, but also to partake in marketing in a way that, yes, it does have a lot of ISI. And I still don't understand why you have to include, if you're allergic to this brand, don't take the brand. Um, I'm still working through that one, but
It's one my husband often says, "Why do if you're allergic to it, shouldn't you just stop? Shouldn't you know that?" Yes, I get that
It
for sure.
how would you know you're allergic to it if you didn't take it? It's very circular.
It is. It is.
But it's a challenge that we have, but, in the end, I think it's probably much more worth it than a beer ad.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we have to give our industry credit over the last few years for starting to really push the envelope and move forward in the space. It wasn't You didn't see nearly as many pharmaceutical companies being a part of these moments before, like the Super Bowl, right? And trying to be humorous or memorable, maybe in a slightly more lighthearted way, trying to figure out a way that makes sense to align with the Oscars, right? It just wasn't part of, I think, many companies' marketing strategies. And so I think there's been a lot of progress made in a short order, which is great, and hopefully patients are finding value in it still as well.
Yeah, you started in this space during the pandemic, and in some ways, that would have been the best time to start, just because, I think everybody was so happy with pharma because of what they were doing at that particular time. And, every industry, people ask, "Well, why is it so much? You know, why can't I get this for less, or what have you?" But the reality of it is, whether, because I've worked in telecommunications and in travel, and you always hate your cell phone provider, you always hate your airline, right? But in this instance, at that particular time, it was such a great time because people really saw what we were doing and saw that it's going to make a big difference, not just for a small group of us, which hopefully, we don't have whatever that condition is in that small group, but in this instance, for all of us, which is really cool.
Yeah, yeah, I hadn't thought about that part, because I mean, I came in about a year before COVID hit. I have thought a lot about the fact that I found meaning in that time, right, working in this industry, but I hadn't thought that I also got to kind of ride the wave at the beginning of the more positive public perception potentially too. But I think that's really it's valid, and I hope that we can maintain some of that. I mean, no industry is perfect, right? But I think there is just so much good that comes out of the work that many of us do every day, and least importantly, marketing, media. And I mean, yes, we have a role, but think about those that are actually developing, researching, developing, creating the drugs. I mean, there is so much blood, sweat, and tears that goes into what comes out of this industry that is so important, that I hope that perception continues with us, even, that we don't need a pandemic, right, to bring that out, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think when we, and hopefully it's a rare situation, but when we have the condition, we start appreciating the brand that much more. You just, unfortunately have to be reminded of it. And hopefully we aren't, because we don't have the condition, or it gets us out of where we were when we had it. What campaign, whether one you worked on or just one you were influenced by, whether in pharma or even more interestingly outside of pharma, uh, do you influence you the most? Do you think about in your day to day?
Mm, that is a great question.
And I can give you an example of mine if you want.
Yeah, let me hear yours, and then give me a moment to think.
So, and it's kind of funny. It is the example I always use when I don't get something that's being presented to me. as an opportunity or a campaign. I was, I don't know, maybe 10 years into my career or less, and I managed our partnerships. And a producer, a production house from the UK, was showing me this campaign. I worked for a telecommunications company for AT&T, and on the data side, and this is when SMS was new, or text messaging. Um, and this company wanted us to pay a whole lot of money to sponsor this show where people would perform, and then there would be winners of the talent show, so to speak. And we were going to then introduce text messaging because that was relatively new. You could vote on your phone using the text messaging, of course, if you were an AT&T wireless subscriber. And I just ran the numbers. I'm an analytics guy. Ran the numbers. The numbers didn't make any sense. I didn't see how anyone would really watch or care about this show. And it was American Idol. And so proven wrong. And to me, whenever I see something that I just don't get, I just think to myself, American Idol, John.
Yeah.
You didn't get American Idol. Think about that before you come to any conclusions. And that literally is the campaign that I never did, although someone else in the company picked it up, and it was not profitable, so I wasn't wrong. But um, you know, I just always remind myself, you don't need another American Idol. Think bigger.
Oh, that's a great one. I think my own personal experience, while I was working on the Walmart account, so I covered grand openings, which we talked a little bit about, back to school, which was very, they're more traditional from a marketing and media standpoint campaign. And then at that moment in time, the topic of corporate responsibility, specifically sustainability, was an important topic for many companies to take on. And we were able to do what were called co-op promotions with select partners. Many products that were sold in Walmart stores, obviously, all of which were sold in Walmart stores. And it was an opportunity where I was able to see some unique ways that products could be created through recycled versions of really popular products. Like, if I remember correctly, there was an ad that was created and that ran, that was about how recycled Coke bottles were being used to create T-shirts that were for sale in the store, right? And things of that nature. And again, it was a moment where what you were talking about, the purpose was bigger than that ad itself, right? And there were several versions where companies were either pushed as co-op partners or already doing so, to create uniquely sustainable or recycled products. And it was really, again, motivating, enlightening, and it shed another light on what could be seen as a more traditional, like, retail business to be working on and campaigns to be working on.
Yeah, and I suspect the creative probably was emotional. When you watched it, it evoked emotion and, kind of made you proud. And we don't have that enough in our industry, and it's, I think, literally because it's such a sensitive topic, you can't get too emotional with it. Um, but when we do, and we do have it from time to time, it really does hit home. And even if it's a campaign I have nothing to do with, it makes me happy as a farmer and a marketer.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think of an example or two right now. I think one great example has been Lilly's campaign around being a medicine company, right? And I can't recall the actual tagline, but the messaging regarding health. Everyone should be able to have access to health, right? And it wasn't all of the ads that have run have not been necessarily product specific, but it's really speaking about how that equity in health should exist. And again, emotional to a level that you don't often see in our category, and still highly relevant, I think, for everyone. So really, yeah, I think there's more and more examples, right? Our industry deserves some props. I think we've made a lot of strides.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned equity in health, and I think that's where, as an industry, we try to ensure there's equity, but I feel like there's so much more we can do. And in some cases, we have challenges in legislation of what how we can target that limits us. What would be the biggest opportunity you wish we were doing in pharma to ensure that everybody, regardless of who they are, where they are, or how they are, um, was able to benefit from, and it allowed us to reach them.
Ooh, there's so many angles on that, right? And many of which I'm not expert nearly enough to talk about, right? But you know, through the lens of my little world, I do just keep going back to the power of information and the power of equity in getting that information out there, right? So in the marketing and media side of the world, advertising side of the world, to me, that means ensuring that when we have a product that's relevant for a large base of potential patients or patients, that we are ensuring that they're being reached and they're being reached with communication that is relevant and represents them too, right? And that we're ensuring that each of our channels that we're choosing and the messages that we're choosing are hitting upon each of those audiences with equity, right? And arming them with that information, making sure the information that's on our websites is reachable for all and easy to access for all. To me, that's the role that I think marketing and advertising can play in that much bigger um, ecosystem, right? When it comes to equity, there's the access side, there's the education side too, making sure that doctors and nurses in the offices are prepared to speak to each individual patient as they need to. There's a lot that goes in. I think our industry is unique in that is that it's complex to drive that the equity that's needed. But I think marketing and media can do their job by ensuring that we're reaching those audiences and that the information is right for them when we are.
Yeah, great point. So, if you could go back to your younger self, as you were thinking about law school and other opportunities, what would you what would you say to yourself? Because I do know there are some people at the beginning of their career who do listen to this show, so I'd love to hear what you would tell them.
Be super open to the opportunities and I'll say for me that doesn't come from a place of like I felt like I closed myself off from things. I think there were opportunities that I probably could have jumped in a little bit more, head first and taken them on full force. But I think there are ones like going to work on new business pitches in other countries with the potential of, moving there and living there if we won the business, right? Being open to those chances, I think, is a great part of this industry where you are able to work across multiple different products, multiple different companies in especially in your early years, like being open, I think is key. And I would encourage it, and it's one of the benefits I think of the work that we do. um Having fun, yeah, the jobs get heavier sometimes as you spend more years in any industry. So enjoying those early years and learning and asking the questions and developing that muscle memory around enjoying the learning, I think, is key, because that's still what, on those heavier days, even now, the fact that I'm always learning, that things are always changing, is what makes it exciting, makes it feel less heavy. So if you can learn how to do that early on, I think it will serve you really, really well as you move through your career. So have fun, be open to the opportunities, and learn how to learn, because that's what keeps it exciting as the years go by.
Excellent advice. And if you could go back 5 years to you when you were starting in pharma, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, another good question. I don't think I fully understood the learning curve. I don't think I fully when I took the job, I was excited and I expected to learn and I expected it to be new, right? You don't take a new job without expecting that. But um, I think probably, leave more space and time for dedicated learning, because there is a lot of uniqueness to this industry. It's not That uniqueness is not a barrier. It's not something that makes it boring or less exciting. But you do need to learn what makes pharmaceutical advertising and marketing unique, and with that you can move forward with greater speed. But I think I underestimated the learning curve in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, there's the pharma half, and then media itself is changing so dramatically. Linear TV, CTV, that didn't CTV wasn't around, I don't know, certainly not 10 years ago. I'm old enough to remember when we launched the internet and people businesses started, commercializing that. I don't think it's going to stop with CTV. There's going to be more media, and we all are always changing and having to adjust because it's you don't specialize in a media, you specialize in reaching patients wherever, and whatever media they like.
Yeah, and that's the newness. That's the exciting part that makes each day fun and interesting, right? And I know for myself that I that's the part I enjoy. So, yeah, needed to leave space to learn pharmaceutical advertising, but learning is part of every day. It just looks a little different, right, as the years go by.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful chat. So glad we were able to make it happen.
Yes, great to see you, and thank you. This is great.
This has been deep.